Oh, okay, go ahead.
All right. We are officially live. Let me double check the channel to make sure, because be bugs. Okay, cool. Oh, it's flipped. Okay, I see on the channel they got it flipped. See, that's the other thing too. StreamYard likes to flip the video. Interesting. Hold on a second.
Well,
Hold
I
on
guess
a
the good
sec.
thing is for those who are on my channel who happen to be paying attention or don't have any jobs or whatever you all have going on in your lives, you can see me live with my man Maestro Stevens, who is I'll say the guy who introduced me to other aspects of artificial intelligence and how to use and the ones that are out there and guiding me in how to take advantage of some of these tools. Being a dinosaur, I was kind of staying and stoic, wanted to stay away from some of the stuff, but it's been very beneficial. So I appreciate him for having me on his platform. And so what's going on,
Respect.
Maestro? I'm here for you. Whatever you want to ask about, whatever we can do, let's get it done.
No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. This is pretty a long time coming. I would definitely say when it comes to us just getting together on wax, as I know you would say, in your DJ Squid days. But yeah, man, we it's been a minute, man. We've been talking. We've been having a lot of conversations behind scene. I came to you a few months ago, and you really helped give me some clarity. In my situation, in my family court dynamics, I found you in my algorithm, and I was just like, hey, let me take a chance on this guy. His content looked interesting, and then I did, and I watched a few more videos, kind of like one of those situations where you just are binge watching, live streaming type of situation. Then it was just interesting just watching your content. So yeah, I reached out. I saw you were the real deal. And another thing I saw too, real quick before I let you chime in, but one of the biggest things, and I know we talked about it many times, was you actually show your your proceedings, man, and that's something that most people don't do. You know what I'm saying? So I think that was commendable. That was like that let me know you was the real deal because it was just something different.
Well, I can't take the credit for being that guy because I give the credit to a guy named William Crowley. We're waiting to get Will to come on. William Crowley is somebody that I met during my, I guess they call it the conscious community days when I was being introduced to that information. And Will said, "Hey, Greg, people are going to tell you a lot of things, but you're going to find out that all that stuff that glitters ain't gold." Essentially, his language is a little bit different. His language is more squid like. I'll try to keep this as family friendly as possible. And he said essentially a lot of guys are capping. And
Mhm.
I don't call out people by name, but I would say from Will, and he gave me his documentation even when he was facing the 50 years. And that interview is on my channel, but we're gonna bring him back now that we use YouTube and all this stuff. But his interview is on my channel with Will Crowley. He used to teach UCC. He had the OIDs or original instrument discharge, whatever they are, and he did a lot of that other stuff. And he told me, "Hey, Greg, be real careful." And I have a background academically, political science, histories, and urban studies are my concentration. And I've taken some law classes, not in law school, but as a part of my academic background. And so I thought that maybe some of this other stuff might have just been some stuff that I wasn't learning in school, like they were keeping stuff from me. I'm not a conspiracy theorist like that, but I'm like, well, maybe there's some other stuff. But when I started watching people who were talking about things not getting the results that met what they were talking about, I kind of stepped back and went back to what I knew how to do, which is study and be a student. And then when I started going through it, I said, well, hey, there's recordings of it, so let me just let people watch or listen, like with some of the earlier my driving out license cases, the many of those that are out there, that they can
Mhm.
actually hear me go through the process. And as you know now, if they listen, they'll hear the evolution. They're looking at Greg in 2026. They don't know about Greg in 2013 and 12, who was getting his behind kicked even in the child support arenas. So I
Right.
learned, and then I had the ability, opportunities to work with attorneys. A lot of them I've had a lot of consultations with and sat next to a lot of them, and they've helped guide me through it. That's why I don't say anything disparaging about attorneys. Um, and I had to say this also, I'm not an attorney, so I don't have a license to practice law. I do not practice law. What I've done is study the law and tell people what I learned and how I gather that information, which is typically through my experiences. So I don't give information as advice to apply to a specific case, but it's general information regarding the law and lawful principles, which by the way belong to the people. So use any information you get from anything that I'm on for educational edification only. And the reason I say that is because I want nothing that I say to be construed to be legal advice. If you feel you need legal advice, I would highly encourage you to hire a licensed, hopefully competent attorney to be legal advised. And I say that because, as you know, I don't want any more goddamn letters any more letters from these damn people claiming that I'm teaching people or practicing law, which I'm so far from doing. I just try to help people understand things the way that I had to be helped. Well, I didn't never grade, but the way I learned how things work, and it's been beneficial for me. And I'm glad I've had the experiences, and hopefully people can learn and be. I think all y'all gonna be way better than me. I truly believe that. I'm the original Terminator. Y'all are the liquid wax, not the the metal, the molten level metal Terminator machines. Y'all got all armament. I'm just the old guy with the experience. So,
well, so has that happened before? Have you gotten going back to what you just said about the letters? Have you gotten letters before of people claiming that you're giving legal advice?
I got letters from the Bar Association. The Florida Bar Association sent me a letter, and I had to actually respond to the letter as they alleged that I was practicing, or they had a complaint that I was practicing law. And I was told by a couple people, including my old lady, she says, I think that came from one of the attorneys you were dealing with who knew about it. And what's interesting enough, I don't know who made the allegation because the bar didn't tell me, but I know one thing that's really, really interesting. In the current case that I have, the one where I lost the attorney, and people can go there and see, hey, my attorney dropped me. What's interesting is the attorney in that case brought up my YouTube channel. I've never heard it before, as well as he brought up what you introduced me to in a different perspective. Because Westlaw uses it, and everybody knows ChatGPT, which I'm not a fan of. But I used to kind of like Gemini a little bit more, but for writing. But I knew how to write anyway. But he said he thought he claimed that I was the product of AI. That's why I'm able to do this stuff. And I'm like, AI is just a tool. AI is like my secretary, but AI will screw up. Even the best AIs will screw up. That's why you have to still be committed to learning the information so that you can operate. You're a businessman. If you have somebody doing a job, ultimately your name is on the companies, just like your name is on that document. You have to oversee the entire process. There are I don't believe there's any shortcuts. There's things that can make it easier, which artificial intelligence can do, but it's not really a shortcut because you still have to read the entirety of the document. You have to check the case law. You need to find case law that's relevant to your situation. At least this is what I do, and hopefully it works for you. So, but it's helped me keep up and make him angry, which is what I want. Hopefully he falls down a flight of steps. But
yeah, I thought we don't say anything negative around here about but we make exceptions every now and then. I think it's interesting that it seems these new tools are making them deem that we're a threat almost in a way, because when you start to attack a person's character, that's one thing. When you attack the facts, that's another thing. When you attack a person's a place of expression, and especially when it's expression through the means of education, that's a whole nother level of a different type of attack, because that doesn't mean that you're doing anything nefarious, but that's how low some people got to go sometimes. And I think that a lot of these tools like AI, for example, like you said, you got to hold yourself accountable, right? You got to vouch for the stuff that you put your stuff on, but it's given a different level of a playing field that I don't think that they wanted us to have this new tool. So it's kind of interesting that you said that that's something that they touched on your YouTube channel. They try to say you were a product of AI. What else could they try to attack you on that wasn't based on the facts and merits of the facts?
I don't know. It was a little bit surprising, and when I showed it to the people who were in my circle, and she says, there's. I've always told me I make things look easy, and I say I don't know how that's even possible. I don't think it comes across that way. But like I did tell him, I told the attorney I've always been him, and that's kind of like the wide receiver in me. You just can't stop me, no matter what you do. But he took the shot. My response on in the court room is gonna have to be different. The pleading was different, but my personal emails to him, they were a little bit stronger, and I wouldn't necessarily say I recommend people do that, but I take exception to people challenging me in certain ways because it's difficult for me to separate the racial aspect from it because I kind of took it as that kind of shot. Because if he was doing his homework, he'd have known that I've been doing this for quite a while. And again, I'm not saying that I'm great at this. I don't think I'm as good as any highly skilled attorney at all because they have much more experience. But I'm not going to let you diminish what I have been able to accomplish, and I'm not going to let you challenge my credibility, especially this guy, based on what I'm seeing. Well, in this case, and it's all, and anybody can go in and look it up. The case is public record anyway, so you can follow the case yourself.
And I think that's another important thing for anybody watching this to notate. I know talking with you, it's something that I've come to get way more understanding on how important it is to put it on the record. It's one thing when you watch a TV show, you watch the movies, and I'm even more cognizant of it now than I ever was before. Like when I watch something and I hear them go, well, for the record, and you might hear this general. I was watching a movie and they were trying to, I guess, get this general that was did some bad stuff in the army. It was again a TV show, and he wanted to correct the record, and it's like, okay, that's one way that they said the record. In family court we have the record as well too. So it's always this record, even in the insurance, the medical field. There's a record that they make of you, even when they give you diagnosis. So it's interesting that you said that. What do you think about them when it comes to either pretending like they don't see things on the record, because that's a pattern that I noticed. They don't see things on the record. And then the follow-up is, how do you feel about them being able to put something on the record that they did not give you a heads up on or give a party a heads up on?
Well, I'll say this. To your first question, they're not obligated to litigate the case for you. And I've said it on a couple of mine, and I learned this through the process. Everything I do is for the next step. I have a case getting ready. I have a certiorari going to the United States Supreme Court. I've been through the entire federal court process, but I didn't know these things years ago. But as I started to learn, I started understanding why the record's important and how to build your record for appeal. And I understood how to use, I think, one of the most important words for any pro se litigant is objection. And then knowing what your reason for the objection is, and knowing how to, after you object, if you have to clean yourself up later on, to be able to go to that point in the record and clean yourself up, which is why I tell everybody, and I've been accused of weaponizing transcripts, which I don't weaponize transcripts. Transcripts are part of the process. Hey man, bro, I don't know. Hey man, listen, those transcripts, if people follow any of my cases, those transcripts are like daggers to these people, because I can go to this precise point that the court reporter picked it up and say, this is what was actually said at line this, page this, line this, and you could put it in quotes. And I think how it got there was because I used to keep a court reporter. I still do, and if I can say her name, I love Taisha Scott, and I love Richard Lee reporting. They've been stalwarts for me in my litigation. In Tampa. Love them. And I can't remember her name, and I apologize. Even the video people who did the video deposition, which is inside the Dropbox, and I had an automobile negligence case, and I had to do my first deposition. They video recorded it, but to have all that stuff on camera, and all of a sudden, and I'm not going to talk about people, how much things cost, but one thing is for sure, all of a sudden, it went from me having the court reporter there to everybody else showing up with these high-end court reporters because they have more money to spend, and I had to spend more money to get it. However, like they say about football, you know, the eye in the sky don't lie. So whatever is in that transcript is in that transcript, and it's up to you to make sure that you can help control your narrative as well. Focus on the issues that you're there to address, stick to those issues, and don't let them get you off. And don't spend as much time trying to prove how much smarter you are than the next person. Stick to the point, which that's one of the things I noticed inside of your what we were talking about is that we have to, you know, this people have asked about the mock thing. That's why I kind of steer away from it because I never know what's going to happen. I know I'm looking at cover two. I know this guy is sinking over here, but until the ball is snapped and everybody starts moving, you really don't know exactly what they're going to do. But you want to be prepared to do what's necessary to get yourself open. I know you're a ball player, so you understand the same things. Like we never like a baseball. You can stand in that, but you can stand in that box. And I've never been a baseball player. I actually love baseball, but I ran crossing routes and got hit and got blown up a lot. I don't know if I could stand inside of a pitch, inside of a batter's box and hope that Maestro don't hit me in the head with that goddamn ball. I don't know if I could do that. It takes a special person to be able to focus on the ball and know that you hope he has enough attention, but you never know what the ball is going to do until it leaves his hand. You may have an idea and be thinking,
Right,
but you never know. So that's, you know, I hope I didn't go on too long, but that's my thing about the mock things. We can talk about scenarios potentially, but the biggest thing is you have to know as much as you can possibly know about what the issue is that you're in there to cover, which is why
yeah.
at issue for the court today is, or we're here today on somebody's motion to do A, B, and or C. And you're going to know that before you get there.
Well, you should know that before you get there. Yeah, typically, yeah, we can get into that. We can get into that soon. But to your point, though, the record I wanted to put on the record for the record, literally on the record for this video, but let people know when it comes to that record how important it is. And to your metaphor, the transcripts, you can consider that the film. You know, I mean, that's how you are able to learn what you did wrong, what you did right, when you have those transcripts, because unless you are recording it yourself, which obviously, you know, they don't want you doing that in the courtroom, but to each their own, the transcripts are the only thing that you can bring to them officially as the film of what happened, right? And that's what I've had to learn. The transcripts are what makes it official, like a referee with a whistle. Without that, they're gonna say it's hearsay. You know, that's when they start using their objections and rules of evidence right back at you. So I think it's interesting how, like you said, you got to get those transcripts. I think that's one of, when we talk about weapons, and I say this all the time, like one of my first videos on this channel was children are weapons. And I meant that. You know, I'm not here to pacify anybody's palate when it comes to their perspective of what this game is. You know, it is what it is. It's about profit at the end of the day. But when they say that you weaponized the transcripts, I thought it was funny because I'm just like, a lot of the things that they already do is considered weaponized, and that's what I think that we have a problem in our society. And I can get your thoughts on it when it comes to gaslighting. I think it's hilarious that oftentimes the things that they will mischaracterize us as pro se litigants or us as just trying to get our fair due process, they'll call us out on the same things that they're doing or the things that we're not doing at all. What are your thoughts on gaslighting being a tactic in the courts?
Well, you say gaslighting. Part of my journey came about when and a buddy of mine, my battle buddy, who's gone with me to a couple of these hearings, and he's been in my Zoom, said, I remember the days when they said, well, you need to learn the law, and they, you know, do everything with, you know, stick their finger in your ear and slap you on the back of the head. And the gaslighting was learn the law. Once, you know, I took it to heart and started saying, let me learn this. Then the asshole in me can come out because now I can do a little bit. I can still run the route, what they call down. I can still run this out route, this out cut, but now I can do a little bit of movement in it. But I'm gonna still get to my point, still push you up if I had to get you off me. So the gaslighting sometimes I believe is in the courtroom to get you off your square, to get you off your mark. And that's why I tell guys, don't be so interested in responding to the BS or the gaslighting. Make sure that you're there to execute the plays that you went there to run and to get them ran efficiently and to progress your case. because it may not get done in one hearing. And I always tell people, everything I do is for the next opportunity. So I'm not Mike Tyson. I can't knock people out like that. You can hit like Floyd.
That's good.
You can hit like Floyd Mayweather, who's great. Even Bud. Bud is a tactician. People may not like Floyd, but Floyd has great defense. He measures his opponent, and eventually he figures out how close his opponent really can get to him, and how close he can get to his opponent, and who has the best opportunity to reach the other person. You can just tell by the way he moves. He doesn't run across the ring throwing hands. He measures. The guy with knockout power, they may typically do that, but and that's why I can appreciate him. He's a tactician and he's a technician, and that's what I try to pride myself on being. Plus, good attorneys are like that. They set you up to get you out of there. Yeah.
And that's why to your point, that's the reason why you have to almost mimic some of the mannerisms, and some of the procedural positioning that they have, because it gets you more aware of how they move in that system. And it is a system at the end of the day. And there's procedures and there's rules, but then there's also that the culture of the court, from what I've heard it, and I had to learn it myself. There's a culture to it, and having to learn how that culture moves, irrespective of the law. As you always say, the law is the law. Well, the reason why we here is because they don't follow the law all the time. So the law is the law, but the law doesn't mean it's enforced, right? So that's why there's different branches. Right. The legislative branch, judicial branch, and legislative, judicial, and executive, right? The enforcers, right? Yeah. So and that's a whole nother thing. And so you can kind of see how those different branches almost branch off in the literal courts, like in you dealing with them and how things are. So it's kind of interesting. But touching on your point of following the law, what are your thoughts on people either putting more energy to changing the law? So going back to the Congress, going back to the legislative branch, right? Should people put more in, and I should say fathers more than anything, should men put more energy into changing or fighting and proving that they can win and showing that they can win? Which one would you say?
The second one is a little bit more nuanced, because I don't understand what that means. But changing the law is one thing, and that's where people say, well, voting is not important. Well, if voting didn't matter, this effort to keep people from voting wouldn't exist. But people forget that the law is written, and it's written by the people who are sent to the legislatures to write it, and then ultimately whoever the head of that particular body is at the federal level is the president. At your state level is your governor. He signs it into law. That's how law works. And so long as there's no conflict between state and federal law, the state law rules. And this notion that the federal law predominates the state, no, it's only in areas where the state law interferes with the well-established federal right, and that's what's called federalism. But I don't want to get into that because it's like I'm teaching again. But the point about, I want to go back to your thing about the mimicking the mannerisms, and then I'll come back to the changing of the laws. I think the law is fine. So mark that down. I think a lot of times the law is fine, because if the law wasn't fine, how would you explain me? I didn't change any law. Everything you see me cite is already written, correct? We've gone through a session before, right? You didn't see nothing that's Greg Doss or Chagret Doss, Well, you might have seen some cases where Chagret Doss had cases there, but Chagret Doss didn't change law.
Right.
The law was there. And when I'm in there fighting with them, when I bring up the law, you don't hear any rebuttals legally, do you? They may not like my tone. They may not like the fact that they probably think I'm shooting them a middle finger, which I probably am. But the issues are the issues. You talked about mimicking the mannerisms, the language, understanding the rules, the procedures. That's important, because even if you don't necessarily speak what they call legalese, you want to understand it. So even if you respond in layman's term, there's a record that gets the layman's terms to match up with the legalese. And maybe you hear in my hearings when I start to cite law, and then I'll spin off and I don't code switch too much in the courtroom, but I'm sure that you've heard some. Don't do that, man. I see you laughing. There's been some moments where I
I know
code
what you
shift.
mean, though. I
I'll
know what
say
you
some
mean.
things, yeah, because you all kind of like the drama aspect of it, but I wasn't doing it with the intention of doing it. I just have been able to now turn the courtroom into a conversation.
Yeah,
I've gotten that comfortable and I understand it, but I learned a lot of this from attorneys and sitting in the courtroom for hours and watching other cases.
mm,
And that's
that
why you
studying.
said you talked about mannerism. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that.
it's like in sports. If I know who I'm playing this week, I got to study the person who I know is going to be in front of me. I don't care so much what the D tackle is going to do or what the uh well, certain linebackers you will because they may come across you, but you don't really care about the trenches because they ain't got nothing to do with you. You don't care what the other team's quarterback does because they got nothing to do with you. You care about the guys who are going to be in front of you, what their schemes typically are like, how the coordinators tend to play against you, and those kind of things. What your strengths are and your weaknesses. Same things with the courtroom. What's the legal issue? What's the legal rule? How can you apply the rule to the issue to conclude that you are entitled to the relief you seek?
And that's a
That's
gem
just a
right
part of the
there.
game.
For people who don't
Direct.
know, yeah, that Iraq, and I want to touch on that a little bit later. But to your point, the mannerisms, yes, I absolutely agree. And that's why I had brought it up the first time. But for you to really show a demonstration and how you practice it, not just advocate for it, and that's an example of doing that, being in the courtrooms, studying the lawyers themselves. And if you can't do that, I mean, what's the next best thing you could do? I mean, you got to watch something. You're gonna have to watch a video if you can't get in the actual courtrooms themselves. Because
And watch
what else you
courtroom
gonna do?
videos. Not I ain't gonna say any TV programs. I want them
I know
fucking
what you mean.
garbage.
Yeah, because there's different type of video.
Yeah, watch courtroom television and watch the kind of
Yeah,
courtroom television that involves a real court case. You
yeah,
will learn so much more about how the courtroom moves. But see, the unfortunate part is you'll see fewer hearings unless there's some hearings that go on before they bring a jury in. But to see how they go through,
yeah.
dealing with different motions that are filed, particularly emergency motions if they're in the middle of a trial. But these are the things that you want to kind of pick up. Um, I highly suggest it. I've had several cases. Well, I've had an attorney a couple of times. I definitely had an attorney when I sued United Parcel Service. And there's some things that I learned even in that process, in watching him. And then before I would become self-represented, which I didn't always seek to be self-represented. Sometimes it's just a consequence of my reality. I started picking up certain things too. And then I do consult with attorneys when I can. There's a reason why I
And that's
have these programs and stuff. Yes, the reason why I pay for it.
so the studying of the attorneys, studying their mannerisms, consulting with them, actually having conversations with them. That's what seems to have given you a lot of, I'll just say, for lack of a better term, some of your superpowers, and maybe even some
Not
confidence.
confidence, yes.
Confident.
I
I'll
don't
call it
my,
superpowers for the Marvel part.
well, I didn't get bitten by radioactive. Well, maybe I did because I one time I believed that they would do the right thing, and then when they stopped doing, when things didn't go the way that I knew I could read that the law said it should, I don't think I become the Hulk necessarily, but I definitely take a like people who read Spider-Man in the comic, especially us old heads, know Peter Parker is one is extremely strong. Spider-Man is extremely strong. He's also very cynical when he's fighting, because he
Mhm.
talks a lot of trash when he's fighting, but he's always thinking. So
Right.
I think I may have picked up some of those traits, even though he's probably everybody's most favorite Marvel character, but people don't understand Thor, and that's probably my 1A is Thor, just because of what he can do. Although I tell people, people forget Thor. He seems to resort to throwing hands, but they forget that he can use magic and stuff as well. They don't know that enough about him. So use whatever you have to use to get you to the next phase. as seamlessly as possible. Get into the end zone and then so you can celebrate. We're going to get into the end zone so you can celebrate. Don't celebrate before the end zone.
That premature celebration.
You don't drop the ball.
It happens. I mean, it's gonna happen to all of us at one time, especially people just getting in the game. But the reason why I asked that question, touching back on, kind of like basically if you had to cross a bridge, you had to go left or right. There's no middle ground. There's no fork in the road. I was asking that because at the end of the day, what we want is an opportunity to have fair, a fair process. They call it due process. We want an opportunity to be heard fairly. We want an opportunity to get our relief fairly. Like there's a fairness to it, and that's the whole purpose of what I believe is the justice, and the end goal is relief, or to get what you want, as long as what you're asking for is reasonable. The reason why I posed that question before, is it changing of the law?
It to be reasonable to be within the stricture of the law, because reasonable.
I meant from a moral. I didn't mean from a legal, a lawful standpoint. I meant like reasonable, just moralistically, being a person who wouldn't be asking for more than they deserve, pretty much. Now we know that that's not how it works. That's what I meant by reasonable, like reasonable.
But as far feelings don't matter in the court.
Yeah, no, feelings don't matter. Yeah, no, I didn't mean that.
How is the law written? What's the law say I'm entitled to? So I just want to make sure we were on there. Because when people say due process, it's kind of vague. You want to be specifically what aspect of due process is violated. I was not given an adequate opportunity to respond to the allegation.
Right.
There's no proof of service, and even in the hearing, my opportunity to respond was limited by, if that's the case, whatever it is, you want to be able to articulate it. And I don't want to argue about it, so make sure I get it on the record. Yeah, he said I ain't here to argue with you. I want to make sure the record reflects that while here, hearing Officer Jackass didn't let me do this, or Your Honor, you have taken over the case and become a part of the case. I don't want to be held in contempt, but your job is, you may not want to be that way, but you just want to make sure you put your point in. I just want the record to reflect that Judge such and such did not perform this function, which most cases I think judges are okay. The judges are okay. And that's maybe.
I know it's a case by case scenario, and to your point, that term due process is ambiguous, right? And that's the reason why I think that it's important. Well, that's the reason why I posed that question, because changing, voting and doing what you have to do to change the law is different than actually challenging the law. It's a different challenge of the law, trying to change the law. And so what I see, and you can tell me if you've seen it too, what I see is there's not enough men, and not just what I see, the data says there's not enough men that are challenging. Now, there's many reasons why they're not challenging, when they're opposed some type of family court issue. But that challenge part is what I'm looking to see. Is it because there's so many barriers? Like you said, you got your confidence from talking with people as well as doing the thing that you need to do. But if you ain't talking with people and you ain't doing the thing you need to do, how are you supposed to get that confidence? It's like that the catch-22, which comes first, the chicken or the egg scenario. So that's why I'm asking you. Okay, you said the law is good where it is, so then men should not focus on trying to change it as far as to their favor. They should just challenge it the correct way and make sure it's applied correctly. Is that where your position is?
I think you conflated two different things. One, I didn't say that because I don't know in my scenario where the law has not been the issue to me. If you watch it, I can articulate legally why I am entitled to the relief I'm entitled to. And within the law, it's there. I think a lot of guys, from my experience, I'll calibrate this and say, most guys are afraid to walk into that courtroom. That's the first thing the man, most guys are afraid. Whereas it's benefited me that I don't have any reservations at all when it comes to that. The other part is I think the law is fine in many instances where it is. But if you're not willing to go in and stand up for your rights under the law, because your rights, you come here with rights, but the law protects your rights. In many instances, the complaints from guys have less to do with what is written in law than how they feel about what's going on with them. I just took my focus from how I felt to the law. And as I said in in many of my videos, I remember sitting in there one time and a lady was really badgering us. Okay, so she was badgering. Yeah, that's a good word, a better phrase. And I said to her, you know what? I'm gonna figure this out. And I use an explicative to describe her. I called her female dog. And then from that day when I started to shift, the people who you all see me engage with, some of them weren't even there, but they saw the evolution. But all I went back to is nothing that I created. I went to studying the law. I did have a background, so I've taken con law, which is constitutional law. I've taken intro to torts. I've taken intro to criminal law. I've taken some business law. I've taken some real estate law. So I have a great understanding of how the law worked practically. Then I began to delve into it, and I understood more of the nuance. I just brought the two of them together. But I can read, and you've heard me say that. I'm not smarter than anybody. I can read. I write well.
But would you say would you say your background is practical based on what you just said as far as your history? Would you say your background is practical for most men?
For most guys, I don't know. I think I've been told she said I have practical application experience in doing these things. My approach to it is practical because this is what's written. Because otherwise, what am I arguing? If I'm going to say the court is improper, not wrong, that you're improper, I had to have some compass to go with, right? Some measuring stick by which to go by. This statute states this. If there's a statute, the court doesn't have discretion. The statute is black letter law. And if you're deviating, now it's okay, your deviation violates whatever it violates. I just try to stick to the law. And depending on your state, some guys may need to go and become more active because in Florida, we have a presumption of equal time with the child. That may not be the same in other states. So the guys in those states need to be talking about why that isn't a state law, because family law is state law. It's not federal. It's very rare that the federal courts have anything to do with your case because the states control that. You may have federal rights that get violated, but you have to also understand you have to exhaust all your remedies before you can get to the federal court. Otherwise, the federal court is going to do what they did to me, which is what? Remand the case back down. And they didn't even give them instructions. They just remanded the case and said, federal courts are courts of limited jurisdiction. So unless you have a federal question or federal law or some well-established federal right, we're not going to deal with it. And we're not going to deal with it if you haven't exhausted all your state remedies. Get your ass out of here. And I showed everybody that on one of those videos, remember? I have one of those. So I'm trying to help you avoid this. But I just think that sometimes within the actual law itself, there's a lot of remedy that people just overlook. Candidly, they overlook it, or I don't think if they even overlook it, they just don't want to go in there and fight, bro. They just don't. They want to be able to say, I threw my paperwork in, I shot that paperwork. My paperwork is so, and that got me what I needed. And the paperwork alone got you what you needed. The court honorably recognized that there was an issue and they corrected the issue. And depending on where you are, the follow-up question is, did they come back? Because I can get, okay, I didn't get served. Okay, we're going to dismiss this case. Did you get in? If the child is, say, 4, did they not come back for 14 years or did they keep coming back? I say that because if they watch my case, what's the one anchor that my cases had? Kids were all emancipated by the time. When I started learning and I found the procedural errors, you can't come back. So we have to deal with what you did at the foundation. And if I find the procedural errors, I go to try to exploit the procedural errors, whether it's economics, failure to do something that was mandatory, shall, must. We look for these words, right? And if there's a shall and a must, and you didn't shall, then must, hey, got a problem, bro. And in many
Yeah.
instances, you could probably get reversal. So that's what that helped. That's helped me. Um, but to your original question, the guys need to become more active in the world that affects them and the children that they care for, or if you don't care for the kids, what you care for yourself. Become more active. Become the change that you want to see. If you think that change is needed.
I, and I can double that. I can coincide with that because I think that that's more realistic. Doubling down on that perspective than sharing or telling men that they're going to have. And the reason why I asked your background, was it practical? Because let's just be honest, if you're saying right now that you've got these accreditations, and you've been around these different systems, and not talk about the pro se aspect, but you actually did things that most men won't do. I strive to at least give at least people that are watching my content some more practical ways of thinking. All right, you ain't gonna have the Greg Doss, you ain't gonna have his background. Like if you're a plumber, if you're a blue collar worker, if you're an average Joe or average dad,
I was.
and I'm not saying no, but this is what makes this is what I used to call it humble Hollywood. You got that humble Hollywood. People used to call me that back in the day because you got this humility, but you also know you're not, you aren't the same as the average person. Because I would challenge, and I would ask you before, would you still feel that way if you had lost your cases? Would you still feel and believe that the law is the law, is fair, if you had lost everything?
I didn't. I don't think I looked at it as the issue being fair or not. I think what I looked at is what was what was defined in the law. And I'm gonna say this: if I didn't think I had a legal path, I wouldn't have traveled. I wouldn't have taken the journey. So I never fought something I didn't think I could win. I know how to concede it. If I can't hit a curve, that ain't the pitch I'm looking for. That's the pitch I'm hoping they don't throw. But a good pitcher is gonna throw what? Throw the damn curve. In most of my instances, and I don't know, we didn't say it in here, but people don't know I was also a union steward for the Teamsters. So I used to drive a truck. But I was in the military, of course. Everybody knows that. I worked in the education system. Um, you know, I have the military, the education, that the you being a union steward and help, and people who don't know, you would know because you're in Ohio. At one time was the largest union state. Um, it gave me an opportunity to represent the worker, which I can't do now as what I do now. But I tell the worker, hey, learn your contract. Those are the rules that govern how you work here, how they can discipline you, what have you. So going in, that is what I think opened up the door to help me when it comes to self-representation. Additionally, I think it still goes back to being an athlete. I was never the kind of person who was afraid of confrontation. I told you I was so far down in the depth chart. I needed a bus ride. Not in high school. Everybody can play in high school. When I got to playing semi-pro and playing with guys that had played in the NFL and guys that had played major college football, I wasn't going to be able to play being passive. So the aggressive might have just been a part of me. But one thing I can't deny is if I was willing to pull in that uniform, I'm also willing to pull a trigger, right? So it takes a different kind of person sometimes to do that kind of stuff too. I'm not, saying that we're all necessarily like that, but it's kind of a given. But and so I don't like people. I never like bullies either. So I definitely wouldn't like being bullied. So again, I can't speak for the guys who don't do it. I'm not going to say they're cowards. I'm just going to say that some guys don't have. Some guys may not feel confident enough to go upside somebody's head. Me, I'm not. I don't have that problem. And so that might be what more guys may need to overcome whatever has them lacking an immense desire to go into the courtroom to state your case, learn the law. This is not like, I'm not for the people who aren't studious. And I told you that when me and you were. Yeah, I'm not for it. I'm not for the dumb. I'm not for that dumb motherfucker. I'm not for him. Go get you somebody else. You're going to have to work, but it's the same way if I was coaching you. I'm okay with a physical mistake. The mental mistakes will drive me up the wall. But my buddy, blessed dead Robert Sewell, said Don Shula was that way. He said he worked for Shula, and Shula was like, he played for Shula. He said Shula's like, everybody's an athlete. But man, when you make a mental mistake, it tends to hurt you a lot more. And that's why, as you've been in sessions before, I coach pretty hard. You probably think I'm not for everybody, which is fine. I don't want everybody calling. I don't want anybody calling me. But the reality is, if I'm going to give you my time, I want to help, try to make you as best prepared for doing what I had to go through as I can. I don't want you ever to need me again, and I can't get you there if I'm soft stepping with you or telling you some reality that I never experienced. Everything I've ever got in that courtroom, I had to work for.
And that's the main piece I think that I want anybody that's watching this to be able to grab or gravitate towards, is that you do have to work for it. I completely agree with you, and that's the point that I was making before. Wasn't to excuse anybody watching this or men watching this to say, hey, you can't do it too, or you don't have to work for it, do these things. It was mainly to say that you have an extensive history, and even when you started speaking on it more, it started, it's adding up, and that to me is a positive thing. But there's a term called being overly optimistic, right? That you can be overly optimistic on certain things, and that's something that I don't want gentlemen watching this to get too optimistic, but without thinking or understanding. Yes, you can apply these things, you can learn these techniques, you can learn the law, do all these things, but what you can't do is you can't just magically create a Greg background. Like you had to go through all these things. You had to have these chapters in your life where you were working for this, or you were in focus on that, and then you transfer those skills on top of the fact that you had, as you say, the dog in you. So when you mix those skills with having that dog in you, and you not liking bullies, because everybody don't like bullies. Some people don't care about bullies. And I believe from your perspective, you're like, y'all not gonna bully me. That's how I feel. Y'all not gonna bully me to a degree, because it does feel like literal legal bullying to a degree. I think, what I'm saying? Like, I think that people watching this, that's the main thing that I wonder. What?
Well, additionally, I say this, and you've seen it in my city council meetings as well. And people may not have known that me even existed. So I know at one time people thought I'd never done anything. I'm like, I don't know how that. You can see me at city council all the time. I've always been that guy. But when you talk about being overly optimistic, that borderlines being unrealistic and living in a fantasy world. These people did not put these buildings, like Vegas don't build hotels giving away money. Trust me. Okay. Those courthouses don't have the mahogany and granite letting people just walk in with some foolish paperwork and win it. That's not being realistic. If that were the case, these entities would not even exist. All you would need is a copying machine. Or I'm sorry, cut and paste is all you would need. So, and within my experiences, I also tell people I'm vested in what I do, because I gave this country a blank check that up to and including my life. And that's a part of that journey. I'm not, no great war hero, but for 8 years of my life, it belonged to this country. And so I demand what I was willing to die for. I don't beg for it. And, but that's just me. But you don't have to have been a military veteran in order to demand that the rights that you are guaranteed are adequately granted when you raise these issues. So, hopefully the people who watch this will gain that. And, whether you're young, old, or what have you, I just will say, I ain't going. I'm just not going.
You gotta have the attitude. I think that's an attitude that you do have to have. That is the attitude that, like you say, it's either you got it or you don't. And I think that's something that you evoke out of your audience. I know, like you already said, you mentioned that in your videos, and when we first talked, hey, I'm not here to sugarcoat it. You're gonna have to do some work, and that's like a part of that. Iraq, I want to touch back on that, because I think that's another gem a lot of people don't understand. I didn't understand it. I know we touched on it briefly not too long ago, but just understanding the whole issue and the rule and the application and then the conclusion, and it's like that formula, that framework, that's reshaped how I write my motions. And those are little things that I think a lot of men who are afraid to get into the courtroom, like you said, they're afraid the law is the law, but they're afraid to challenge and make sure the law is applied to them. It's because they don't have those those bullets, you know what I'm saying, or they don't have that Teflon, that armor to go in there and say, you know what, I am using the issue, I am citing the actual rule or case law mixed with that rule. This is the way it's supposed to be applied, and this is what I deserve. That's not something that you're gonna learn on day one.
No. Now I'll say about the Iraq. I learned from an attorney. So I learned a lot of stuff from attorneys, and it's the issue rule analysis or application and conclusion is easier than CRAC. There's some other ones as well, but just I tell people to Google it. But I'm gonna say this also. I always knew that I was the remedy. When people started talking about, how I write and what have you, and people who know me a while will say, on a couple of my, you go check out the Iron Sharpening Iron podcast that myself and brother Jami, Reverend Jami do. You'll hear him say I have 10 eggs. Well, I understood that I was the remedy. The paperwork was fine, yeah, and I've gotten to become a better writer. And what I'm going to say is this. So don't put this on my show, anybody listening. A lot of this so-called package boy or guru stuff is for people who want people coming back. Because I'm just watching them. I don't have to get too deep into it, but if any of them have something to say, they should say it here where we're talking. And I'm always available for this conversation. I don't help you if I have you depending upon me. I don't want to be the fish store. I want us to go out there and learn how to fish. I don't want you coming to me to buy no fish. Let's go out here and learn how so that you can do this. Because one day Greg's voice will go still. That's just the reality. What happens then? You want this stuff to move forward. And somebody out there is a younger, bigger, better, smarter, more charismatic version of Greg. They're out there somewhere. I know that. They just have to, something has to inspire them the same way something inspired me. The reality is I didn't learn any of this stuff. Like I didn't become this proficient until well after the age of 40. So I'm 58 now. If I had been 30, whatever, I would not know you people. I can promise you. If I had 1/10 of this information or insight when I was in my 30s, there's nothing for us to have talked about. Right. So I tell people, invest in you, believe in you, and be willing to do what's necessary. You can't finish a race until you start it. And my dad used to say this, you set a long-term goal, but you have short-term objectives. And so long as you continue to do it, as long as you continue to do it, and the next thing you know, you will have completed it. And that's how I look at what I have going here. And I have other things that I still am trying to get done. But I have to deal with this stuff here in front of me. But I would tell anybody, believe in yourself. And if a person can't show you that they have done something, it's up to you how you feel about it. Or at least can show you, even if it did not work, this is what my plan was. This is how I went about it. And they should be fully transparent. So if you ask me a question, I have no problem answering it because I can tell you what I went through, tell you how it got done. It doesn't tell you how to do it for you. So that's why I believe in transparency. And again, shout out to Will Crawley, the credit man.
Well, see, I'm going to credit you when I talk. I learn certain terminologies, and that's the beautiful thing, right? We pass it from one to another to another to another. I don't think that ever takes away from the originator, but it also lets you know that the messenger, you being the conduit in my situation, personally, it may be something different from somebody else, but being that channel, that's how I learned, that particular framework or method. And like you said, it's many more of them out there. You can always look it up and Google it, do your own research. That was one that resonated with me. And that's how I now file all my motions, especially because I came to you when it came to more of a custody scenario. However, I learned more over time, you more about that child support life, and that's when I started studying more of that about you. And so it was interesting because I'm appealing my child support order. My first child support order, my first child support order, and I'm appealing that first order. So I'm going through the whole motion that most men don't go through on the first go. And I met you in this particular phase of my life, and I didn't even have to talk to you. I haven't told you this yet, so I'm saying I didn't have to talk to you about the child support stuff. I'm like, you know what? You absolutely are worth another every second of every moment that I spent. But I'm like, I've learned so much from Greg. He's gave me so much insight, information. You share, like you said, you're so transparent. You know, sometimes you may say overly transparent, but you're so transparent. I was able to take that information and use a tool. I kind of want to touch on this with a little bit of AI to it and bridge that gap, but use a tool with like a Claude and use that information, my transcripts, use the lessons that you taught, use your stance, your cases, and the consultation that we did for the custody stuff. I was able to fuse all of that and feel confident enough to at least file my appellate brief. You know, that's the brief that you file when you're going through an appeal case. I would have never felt that way. I would have had to hire somebody else or work with somebody else or do another follow-up consultation with somebody else if you hadn't been able to set me up. And maybe you don't even know this, but set me up on that first go. And I knew for a fact, okay, this guy's he's the real deal, because you have all the pieces, all the connectors out there. How are you now thinking that men, and then I know that may be overkill for most men, but in utilizing the information that's out there, plus using AI, when it comes to dealing with, as you say, eliminating your exposure, how are men supposed to help eliminate their exposure in 2026 and beyond with these tools and where we're at?
Well, one thing is learn whatever your bench book states in your state. Actually, learn your state rules. I used to do this when I was DJ Squid and I was Greg. I'm still Squid. I'm Greg also. I used to do shows where I just read the Constitution, so I understand the state and the federal Constitution, academically and also personally. I just understood them, so I actually would take the time to read them, understand state statutes, what statutes apply to what I have going on. I knew how to research well before we had all the technology that we have now. But what I dedicated myself to, at one time I listened to a lot of talk radio, more political and sports talk radio. And, you know, being a DJ, I listen to music. I said, I'm going to take the same amount of time it would take me to listen to 3 songs, about 10, 15 minutes a day. And I'm going to start transferring that from listening to music to listening to bar exams, bar exam prep, because I got a lot of those. I have a lot of
Uh-oh. Did we lose you? 1 second, y'all. Let's see. Greg froze. So give us 1 second. Sometimes this happens. You already know how the internet goes. You already know. Hopefully he'll be able to join back real quick. But yeah, before Greg jumps back on, because I think he's getting his camera together. It's interesting, y'all, how Greg
the time to dedicate.
Okay,
okay, we're back.
Okay,
yeah. Take time. I didn't stop speaking. Take time to dedicate to learning it. That's it. Again, hopefully I'm not going to repeat it. We can cut it out. 3 minutes. 15 minutes a day. And if you think 15 minutes a day over a week, it's almost 2 hours. And you think you take 2 hours of study times a year, that's the 52 weeks, that's over 100 extra hours of studying. How much more would you know? Now, granted, I've done a lot more because I had cases where my freedom was at stake. Because every one of those driving out license cases, I was looking at jail time. I was just willing to fight because I knew that the suspension was based upon the child support stuff that we now know I shouldn't have been up under, but I was willing to do that. I do not recommend anybody do what Greg did. Don't go to jail about this. Don't lose your job. I do work for me, but I'm not trying to be a martyr. I'm just willing to stand up for what people were willing to stand up for me who didn't know me 60 years ago. So I'm standing on somebody else's shoulder. So I'm just carrying the torch that they handed to me, and I'm passing it along because I am in my future. You know, this is you young guys' future. You all need to be taking up these mantras and becoming more participatory in the things that affect your life and not looking for somebody else to do it, because that's really a waste of time. But, you know, I've done appeals as well. Yeah, about probably 14 of them at least. I've been at least either appeals. And by the way, we know now that I had a reversal in my favor at the Second District Court of Appeals, reversed in my favor. So, you know, it's just staying with it and to stick to it. Well, you know, just to stick to it, just got it there. And then, you know, working within the confines of the law and trying to hold these people to it. So It's not easy, but you know, nothing in life worth having ever is easy. So what I would tell anybody who's out here who's thinking about navigating this way, you have to take an adult approach to overcoming whatever your situations are, particularly if they're legal. You know, and again, I always recommend you get an attorney. Um, but if you're not going to get an attorney, you have to be willing to be as professional as an attorney. Because when you go in the courtroom, everybody's a professional at that courtroom except you, typically. So just keep that in mind.
That's and that's goes back to what you were saying before. I know the stream went out for a second there, but the main part that it seemed that you were saying um was when it came to that, you know, again, exposing or eliminating your exposure. That's the term. And being able to do that in many different ways. But as you were saying at the end of what you just mentioned, you know, there's a lot of things that you would not recommend in that fight, you know, when you're going through that process, that proceeding. However, you know, you were willing to do what you needed to do regardless. But that's why I wanted to bring up that point, you know, in terms of like how that aligned with, you know, dealing with child support, because that was something that you had shared with me, was just the concept of eliminating, you know, your exposure. And it's something that really resonated with me because I was like, I never really thought of it that way.
Reducing your exposure. Yeah. So in other
Or
words,
reducing. That's my bad.
Okay, so here we go. This is what I mean when I say this. And my old lady helped me with this as well. If you have a $500 monthly obligation and we can work it to either get you to 100, that's a win.
Right.
Some guy, well, I got to get rid of it. Well, maybe you can. That may involve time sharing. Are you getting credit for um, you paying a prepaid health insurance? There's other nuances that are involved, but these are things that
Right.
almost anybody can do. But if you go in there with some notion that they can't have you on support because you know you can turn 80 degrees north on a Thursday, you know that's just foolish. It got nothing to do with what you're there for. You know, and the court don't have jurisdiction. Well, what does jurisdiction even mean? And in most instances, the court's going to have jurisdiction. In 95% of the cases, they're going to easily have jurisdiction. The moment you show your ass up, it gives them jurisdiction if you don't challenge it. And
Right.
typically, if there's some nexus between you and the mother and the children within that state or that jurisdiction, they're going to have jurisdiction. So why are you worried about jurisdiction? Deal with the merits of the issue. Is there a time sharing in place? Did the What's the law say regarding that? Was the financials proper when they made the determination? There's so many other things that are within the state law that can give you the relief that you would need to at least be able to move on with your life comfortably. But most guys would rather focus on all the fantastical things that some of these bozos are out here saying, which has no place in law. If it did, nobody would be on it. If it was easy to be dumb and get off, every dummy would be off, right?
It's a system. It would be like they make too much money off of this system. And to your point, the reducing, and you know, I'm saying, if I'm correcting myself for the record, reducing exposure, you know, even mitigating, you know, not necessarily eliminating, because you ain't gonna be able to eliminate everything. You know, you're gonna be exposed in some way. They're gonna get you some way. But to your point, that's the reason why I ended up having to file my appeals on both the custody ruling and the child support ruling, because they were tied together, you know. And that's another thing that you had taught me that I didn't know back then, but you don't know what you don't know, you know. And you were talking about consolidating, you know. And so now moving forward, I know that they intentionally kept my custody and my child support separate, two separate magistrates, when they 100% had everything to do with each other, because the child support was dependent on my custody, my parenting time, my overnights.
But that might be how your state's organized, because you can have an administrative child support can move administratively because statute may allow it, and you don't raise the issue of custody or time sharing, whatever it's called in your state, and hence if you don't raise it, if you don't raise an issue, you are, what's the word, waiving it.
Waiving your rights. Yeah, right.
So these are things. Just I tell people to keep these things in mind, and again, I'm not a genius at anything or a guru at anything. I'm just a guru at my life. I know what I've done. I know what I've seen. I know what we've helped a lot of other guys uh, gain as far as the relief that they're entitled to, and women as well. So, I say I would just stick to that. And with that being said, if there's anything else, cool. If not, we can do
No,
it again. But I appreciate it. I appreciate you
I
giving
was
me this
gonna.
opportunity on your platform, man.
Was there anything else? I was going to ask you when you followed that last point. Was there anything else that we didn't touch on, or one last thing in terms of, advice, um,
I don't give it
on child support, or not advice, but well, I didn't want to say because then yeah, not advice, but thoughts on your perspective, that somebody could learn from. What is anything last parts that you can say when it comes to the child support part?
There's no such thing as a free lunch. You're not gonna get a whole lot when you give so little. If you want to be good at this, if you want to have an avenue out, you're gonna have to put in some sweat equity. I do not know of any way possible. Not that it doesn't exist. I personally can't tell you that you can do this without putting in the time, the study, and becoming a better version of yourself. If not for you, for whoever comes behind you. That I just wanted to be a better version to each one and teach one.
That being said, Greg Dawson,
Oh, you clipped out.
your company, you want to shout out channel, anything?
Oh, I said, like I always say, it's always important. Sometimes it's not about right or wrong. More importantly, it's about clarity. You never reach a resolution if you're not willing to engage in honest dialogue. Even if the dialogue is with yourself, take time to hug the person you love and love the person you hug. On behalf of Greg Doss, GD9 Attorney Pro Se Consultants, I appreciate Mr. Stevens allowing me to come on. I look forward to some of the other things we have planned in the future.
Man, I appreciate you. Well, thank you once again for blessing the channel, blessing the conversation with your wisdom and your non-legal advice. Be specific. Just wisdom, just wisdom and jewel. I appreciate you. I'm gonna end the live stream here, y'all. Till next time. Peace.
Shout out better.
I appreciate you, man.
No doubt.